Hello, my friends. You are listening to Cake Over Keto. Thank you for finding the time to join me. This is your safe space for the next 20-ish minutes where we talk about the reality of disordered eating and eating disorder recovery and how to find peace and freedom from food rules, diet culture, and fear of weight gain. Let there be no guilt, shame, or self-punishment when we eat. I am Mel Wakeman, registered nutritionist, intuitive eating practitioner, non-diet counsellor, and lover of snowballs. You know, those delightful little balls of marshmallow coated in chocolate and then coconut that you can just about pop in your mouth whole. Just don't try to speak when you do. I specialise in disordered eating and recovering from chronic dieting, body dissatisfaction, and eating disorder recovery, all through a weight-inclusive lens. Please keep your ears plugged in. What's coming up in this episode about anxiety and food issues is right around the corner. Experiencing anxiety around food might mean relying on food to help you deal with existing anxiety, typically called comfort or emotional eating. And that might mean eating more food than usual. It also might mean binge eating. But it can also look like food avoidance too, meaning not enough food is eaten to support your well-being. Anxiety, however, can also come on due to worrying about eating, and this may link to a specific food or type of food. And you may have anxiety about what might happen to you when you eat. And these types of anxieties and behaviours can definitely overlap. In this episode, I'll explain what these anxiety-based eating problems can look like. They are certainly not to be ignored, yet I see time and time again these behaviours being shamed, particularly when we eat more, and praised, usually when we eat less, which makes recognising them and seeking help for them even more difficult. Disordered eating behaviours that increase the risk of developing anxiety around food are also normalised in our culture. And again, any difficulty in sustaining these behaviours, which are usually very difficult to maintain, is often shamed. So we need to talk about this shame. And I'll talk through all the different causes of food anxiety, and no, this isn't your fault. And of course, I need to explain what you can do to help alleviate it. And that bit will be in the pick and mix at the end. Because when this anxiety affects your day-to-day life, when it interferes with your quality of life, it's no fun and it's not healthy either. So get your kettle on and find a cozy spot, or even take me into the loo or out in the car or sit me next to the iron for the next 20 minutes. If you hang out on social media, please come and find me. I'm on Instagram as Mel Wakeman and on TikTok as Cake Over Keto. Right, let's dive in. Anxiety around food can affect anyone, and it does. It doesn't mean someone who doesn't use food as a coping strategy, whether that's eating more or eating less, has more willpower or is a better person. Life can feel so crazy at times. So what are we supposed to do to cope? We keep being told we are living in more anxious times. And I have a feeling that's true. There's plenty of research going on looking into this post-pandemic now, and the evidence already suggests there has been a steady increase in its prevalence, particularly with generalised anxiety disorder, certainly here in the UK anyway. There's also been a rise in prescriptions being issued for meds, and mental health and eating disorder services are more stretched than ever. Now, there'll be multiple reasons as to why this is the case, but we do know that folk who experience anxiety are likely to be at a greater risk of developing disordered eating or an eating disorder. In fact, around 65% of patients with eating disorders, and these were most often anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa, met the criteria for at least one anxiety disorder. And of course, this number can only reflect the number of people who seek help with anxiety or eating disorders and get actual diagnoses. The role of anxiety often starts early in life, with anxiety disorders most commonly developing in childhood, 61% of the time before the onset of an eating disorder. In terms of anxiety disorders, there is GAD, or generalized anxiety disorder, which is having excessive and difficult to control worry about a number of life situations. So nothing in particular, they kind of free float, as it were. And that may or can mean worrying about getting ill or having a relative getting ill, being in an accident. And that's according to the ICD-10 diagnostic tools. So there's no potential actual reason for these worries. Now, I'm not dismissing this anxiety by saying that. What I mean is anxiety is really more about the perception rather than reality. So it's worth mentioning here that anxiety shares characteristics with fear. It's not the same as fear. Fear is the emotional response to real or perceived imminent threat or danger, whereas anxiety is more about anticipation of a future threat, what might happen, and we can go into catastrophic thinking with that. And fear often initiates kind of visceral fight and flight or freeze responses, whereas anxiety causes maybe muscle tension, sweating, lightheadedness, palpitations, digestive discomfort, and avoidant behaviours. Other anxiety disorders are also linked to eating disorders. So one might include social anxiety disorder, which involves fear or anxiety over social situations and exposure to possible scrutiny by others. And this is prevalent in around 20% of folk with eating disorders, because stress from negative social evaluations and situations seems to play a pivotal role as a cause of eating disorder symptoms. Another one is obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, that involves someone having repeated unwanted thoughts that lead them then to engage in repetitive behaviours. And eating disorders share this symptomology, sometimes including excessive thoughts about food and calories and weight. And it's been found that around 41% of patients with eating disorders also experience OCD. Then there's panic disorder, which is the experience of sudden and repeated attacks of fear that may last for several minutes. And these panic attacks can often make someone feel as if they're dying. And it's theorized that eating disorders and panic attacks have strong relationship because they become part of a vicious sort of binge, panic, purge cycle. And in this cycle, stress results, to which the patient responds by maybe binging as a coping mechanism. And the binge evokes renewed panic, followed by purging behaviors. It's complicated, isn't it? So my point is that anxiety often drives disordered eating behaviors, just as it can OCD, substance misuse, and addictions, all of which can carry such shame. So can we try to release this shame or challenge the shame? These behaviors are simply your body trying to look after you, to keep you safe. It's doing its best. It's also doing what it knows. And that will be based on your past lived experience, maybe what you've been taught and learned. It's not something that we can necessarily go, oh, I should have done something different. Not in the moment anyway. So if food was something that helped you feel safe and loved or connected, even for just a moment, it makes sense to your body to at least try and seek that again when you're feeling unsafe or vulnerable. If food helped distract you from difficult feelings and helped you feel less by numbing your body, or if it helped you feel something different to what you're so tired of feeling, then it makes sense to your body to try that again when it's all too much. If food has made you feel unwell, if it caused you physical pain, or if avoiding food helped you in some way make things feel easier or gave you a sense of more control, then more restrictive eating behaviours may be your body's go-to coping response. They will all make sense to your body at the time. And when you don't know any different, and you don't have access to other coping strategies, we can't shame that. From my perspective, There is immense resourcefulness in these coping strategies. It shows a strength to me in an individual. So there is nothing to be ashamed of here. But here's the caveat. If these coping strategies are making you unwell, if they are distorting your self-perception and causing poor body image or body dysmorphic disorder, if you end up fearing weight gain, if it can lead to overly restrictive eating, that in itself can continue to spiral the anxiety. So this might look like having little or no interest in food, maybe only eating certain textures or wanting to avoid certain colours or odours or food touching each other. There may be a fear of gagging or choking. And these are called sensory processing difficulties, which can co-occur with neurodiversity, particularly with autism spectrum disorder. Now, when the anxiety is related to body image distortion or fear of weight gain, it can look like feeling overwhelmed by food choices, obsession with nutritional information, body weight or body image, and negative self-talk about eating or appearance. And again, this shows up in neurodiversity, particularly with ADHD, where there's a lower sense of emotional regulation. So these kind of eating behaviors may be associated with unrealistic expectations and perfectionism. We see it a lot in terms of, recovering perfectionists or high achievers. They can be associated with cultural, community, and peer pressure about appearance. And they can be linked to early experiences of trauma. So these eating behaviors are the signs. They are the clues that kind of need to be acknowledged to take you towards seeking and strengthening healthier, more effective coping strategies, ones that better serve you, support you, and meet more of your needs. And blame is not what's needed here. It's not your fault for not finding other ways to cope. It's not your fault you weren't shown or taught how to manage difficult emotions, how to build coping strategies. So hang on just for a moment. My pick and mix is coming up next, and this is where I'm going to give you some tips to help you manage anxiety around food. I'll also include some key signs that would indicate you should seek professional medical help. So don't go anywhere. Back in just a second. Right, I've got 3 little nuggets you might find helpful in breaking the cycle of rumination, challenging those anxious thoughts, and working towards restoring a sense of calm. And the first one is journaling. Oh, I know. Journaling is one of the most effective tools in disordered eating and eating disorder recovery, but I know it's also the most resisted. It is a practice you need to work at. So despite the resistance and possible anxiety I've just induced by saying the word journaling, it can absolutely help to reduce anxiety. It can lessen feelings of distress, and it works to increase your well-being. It's a great way to offload and help you see the bigger picture. And there is no right way to do it. You don't have to do it every day. And for me personally, I find prompts very helpful. And I'm including a list in the show notes for you that you can download. Oh, and it doesn't have to be neat or make sense. So try and notice and capture your negative self-talk. What was going on around you at the time to trigger that? Can you notice any harmful thinking patterns? Could you ask yourself, what if I looked at this from a different perspective? How else could I see this? And what would I say to my best friend? Try to include a positive focus too, like what went well or what are you thankful for? It sounds a bit cheesy, but it works. It really does. And what's even better is, how has your body taken care of you today? Number 2, up your self-care. Anxious brains and bodies are highly activated. It can take a while to come down off the ceiling or to be unplugged. So don't expect miracles in terms of being able to switch off this anxiety. But what may help is making a list of 10 things you could do that bring you a sense of ease, different things that might be soothing, relaxing, a gentle distraction, or a way to release pent-up adrenaline. So it might be screaming into a pillow. It might be getting outside in nature. It might be crafting one way or another. It might be watching an old sitcom on Netflix, lying with your legs up a wall, or listening to some music or a guided meditation. We have to make time for this self-care. It's vital. Number 3, make friends with your nervous system. We're often told difficult feelings and emotions are to be avoided. And let's face it, feeling anxious doesn't feel great. It's exhausting. But what if we flipped the perspective here? Because these anxious feelings are clues. They're not bad clues. They're helpful clues. They just are. We don't need to turn them into something harmful or shameful. So what if you could learn to sit with those difficult feelings, the stomach churning, the overthinking mind, the pounding heart, the nausea? And what is often helpful when experiencing these feelings is to try to go back into your body, because we get stuck up in our heads. That's where we overthink and ruminate. But if we can become more embodied, more connected to yourself, you'll more likely be able to determine what you're actually needing. So embodiment practices like breath work, yoga, stretching, dancing, or doing a body scan all use the body as a tool for coming home, for healing through self-awareness without judgment, for mindfulness, connection, for self-regulation, and creating self-acceptance. Now, I have to mention seeking help. If you or a loved one is feeling so preoccupied with thoughts around food, if it's affecting your eating, your relationships, your daily and social functioning and well-being, it is time to seek help. You don't have to work through overwhelming feelings or difficult emotions on your own. Not nourishing your body adequately will only add to the anxiety, as your body will perceive that as a threat. And it isn't healthy if you're engaging in purging behaviours like vomiting or using laxatives or over-exercising to prevent weight gain or to deal with the anxiety. I know it may feel impossible, but my door is open if you need an ear or some guidance. You can do this. So that is it for this episode, my friends. Thank you for joining me. If you want to get in touch, you can email your thoughts and questions to me at mel@wakemannutrition.com, or come and find me on Instagram and TikTok. There's content in there most days of the week. Join me next time as I help you navigate the festive period with an eating disorder or disordered eating. Christmas or any other kind of festive holiday celebrations can be tricky times when families are thrown together. Anxiety levels can peak, especially if you're out of your normal routine. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out that one. In the meantime, take care of yourself. Know that you are enough, always. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.